This is session 1, Power Pivot using Excel sheets. My name is Stephen Knight and welcome. Now, why would you use Power Pivot? Okay, you want to use Power Pivot if you have to analyse data where you have large blocks of data that could possibly bigger than would fit on an Excel sheet, so bigger than 1,048,000 and a bit rows. You might have related data in different sheets, so customer data on one sheet, payment data on another, invoices and sales on another, and we need to bring all of that together in a pivot table where we have something like customer ID or invoice ID, some shared columns between the different sets of data on different worksheets, or you have large amounts of data in different sources, for example in Access or SQL Server or other forms of modern data storage. So with this data, we need to create pivot tables, pivot charts, reports, dashboards using this data. Okay, so we need to report on our data that is in Excel and other sources. It's not in one sheet, or we can't present it as one sheet because it's too complex. There are relationships and things happening with it. Now, Power Pivot's also worth exploring because it's kind of the gateway to Power View, Power Query, and Power BI. So this is a good place to start for exploring these other products if you've got Excel 2013 or Office 365. Particularly if you've got SharePoint Online, there's some good connections that we can do as we move into the follow-on products with this, with Power Query and Power BI. Now, the last point here is I did mention Excel 2013. This is also available, Power Pivot, for Excel 2010. It's a download. You go to the Microsoft website to get it. So let's assuming we've either downloaded Power Pivot or we've added the add-on if we're Excel 2013 and we're ready to go. I will provide on my blog some links to where to go to get started to get the necessary bits and pieces, but you can handle that separately. So let's make a start. The process is fairly simple. We're going to convert our data to tables. We're going to add those tables to the data model. We're then going to create some calculations, 2 calculations I've got in mind to just demonstrate calculations using data within a table and calculations using data across different tables. And we'll then, at the end of that, create a pivot table. So that's the process. So we're at step 1. We are about to convert our lists to tables. Now, some rules we need to observe. Column headings across the top must be unique. Okay, they cannot be duplicated. So within the list, the column headings must be unique. Also, no empty columns and no empty rows. You can have the odd empty cell where we might not know a particular piece of information, a customer's postcode or whether they're a repeat customer, but basically we must have a solid block of data. If you've got an empty row or an empty column, Excel will stop at the empty row or the empty column and you won't pick up all your data. So we've got a solid block of data. We're good to go. All we need to do now is click inside the data and we will go up to the Insert tab, and third icon or tool in from the left, we'll click Table. It puts the marching ants around our data. Now, something you won't see in my recording is the actual marquee effect with the ants actually moving, but we can see them there. And the next thing just to check is that we've got my table has headers selected. Now, sometimes by default that'll be off and it won't pick up that we've got column headings across the top. So we do in this case, and most cases when you've exported data into Excel, you will have headings. So we want that ticked and we'll go OK. Then if we click inside our data, we've now got a table as signified by the fact that it's picked up the alternate row shading, column headings across the top, and all the good things we get from tables. Now the next thing I'm going to do is optional, but it's a good idea, is I'm going to give my table a name. So I'm still on the Design tab. I'm going up onto the ribbon and I will call this table Sales Data and press Enter. It's just a little thing that if we do this now, when we do our our Power Pivot a little later, this will help identify which table is which. Now, just repeating the process, I've got a table to act as a cross-reference for postcodes. So I've got people's postcodes, we've got their locations. Again, insert table. Our table does have headers and we're in good shape there. And I'll give this a name just to record that. Again, makes it easier later on if we've done that. Got a good little table here, which is our products. Now, the idea with our products is this gives us our product names that we can cross-reference, and it gives us our commissions as well. So we'll use that in some calculations. Again, same basic process, insert table, got the marching ants, we'll go OK. And my next little step here is to give this a name. So that we're good to go there. Last table that I'm looking at is this table represents one of two ways we can solve a particular problem. The Power Pivot approach to pivot tables doesn't do grouping by dates, but there are two ways to solve this. One is by doing formulas, which I'm going to illustrate in session 2. One is by having a separate table with the months actually recorded, and so we'll illustrate that approach in this particular lesson. And it gives us a chance to practice our relationships as well, but bear in mind, as I said, there are two ways to solve this. This is just one of them. So again, I'll go Insert Table, and I will give this table a name. Feel free not to follow my spelling. And we're now ready to start adding our tables to the model. Back on the first sheet now, back on my sales data sheet, up on the ribbon, I'm looking for my Power Pivot tab. And this is actually a fairly easy process to add this to the model. I'm just going to click Add to Model. Now you may notice it opens the actual Power Pivot environment, and we've got our table added to the model. So we're now seeing the resized Power Pivot environment. Now, in our resized Power Pivot environment, you'll notice that we're seeing our table of data. We're seeing down the bottom here where it says sales data, which it's picked up being the name from the original table. So that's important to us. We can rename them once we've created them, but it's just nice if it does it for it automatically. Otherwise, it's just going to be table 1, 2, 3, 4. So you could use these names to indicate the source that your data is actually coming from. Okay, let's just very quickly bring the rest of these in so we can have a look at what this looks like when we've added them all to the table. So again, I'm clicking inside my data, adding it to the model. You'll notice now that I've got two sets of data here in the Power Pivot environment. Just repeat the process. This is just a little bit of reinforcement. So I've added my product information, including my commissions. Now, another way to get back to my Excel spreadsheet is we've also got a little green icon up the top here, which is the switch to workbook icon, which will take me back to the workbook. And I can click in there and again add to the data model. So what we've now got is a view of all of our different tables. We're now going to set up some relationships between the tables that we've just added to the model. Now there are two ways to do this. So method number 1 I'm in my Power Pivot view. I'm going up to create relationship, and I'm on my sales table, so it's looking at the sales data. I need to look for what's the key that I'm working with here between the different tables. Now I want to relate to from sales data to postcodes. So what I'm going to do is choose my second table is the postcodes table, and the shared field is postcodes. So we can relate from customer postcode to postcode. Those of you who've worked with Access are recognising this is a strong family resemblance. I'm now going to create that relationship. So we've now got a relationship between postcodes and sales data, which we can now use that in our pivot table that we'll build, where we can draw data from two different tables to build our pivot table. Now, the second relationship we need to create is from product info to sales data, so we can relate product ID, and you'll notice we have a product code in one table, and in another table, in our product info table, we have product ID. So these are shared. Best practice would be to have them as the same name, but the source the data's come from, maybe they've used some different names. That's actually okay. So what we need to do, we can use the same method, or we can get a little bit clever here. I've just changed tabs. I've gone back to the Home tab, and I'm going to go to the diagram view, which again, very much like your relationships in Access. So what we're looking at now is we can move our tables around, and I can extend them. Now I want to build a relationship between two tables, so I'm going to take product code and drag it over to product ID, and it creates a relationship between the two tables. And I can also double click on that relationship, and when I double click on the relationship, I get my relationship window, and I can just check that I've got what I need there. Now I also want to relate between months and our sales data table, but this is where we need to do our very first calculation. So we will do a little bit of adding to the sales data, and then we'll set up our relationship. So I'm going to go back to the data view. I'm back in my sales data. Let's do our first calculation. I'm going to change the column name and call it month num for month number. And I'm just going to do a little function here. Now, what I can actually do is use the function wizard. Again, we can leverage our Excel skills. We've got a fairly reasonable subset of functions available to us here. And what I'm going to be using is the month function. Now I now need to tell it what column, so I'm going to go to my transaction date. I'll close the brackets. You'll notice that the field name is in square brackets. Again, you'll recognise that from Access and other similar sorts of products. And then when I press enter, I've now got the month in which the particular transaction occurred as a numerical value. Now, I can now use that to make a relationship between this table and my other table that's a list of months. Now, as I said, there's another way to skin this particular cat, but I'll cover that in session 2. So let's go now to our diagram view. We've got month num. I can now make a relationship from month num to month num. Again, I can check that because you'll notice it's not entirely clear visually what's going on, but we can see that we've got the relationship on the right fields. So I'm going to go OK. And we're pretty much now set to start doing some more involved calculations and to do our pivot tables. So we'll be back in a moment to do just that. Now we're going to do a calculation, first off just using values in the table. You're going to recognise this as not being too different to what you would do with a regular table in Excel now, but we'll cover it for revision, and then we'll have a look at doing a calculation using two tables based on the relationship. So we want to work out the value of the sale. So we have here unit price and a volume, a number of units sold. So this is just a simple pressing equals to start the ball rolling. Clicking on unit sale price, we then need a good old-fashioned asterisk for multiply, and I'm clicking on the number of units sold and pressing enter, and bingo bango bongo, we've now got the sale price. And we'll even add a little bit of formatting to that. We'll say they're all currency, and since we don't have any cents, we'll decrease the decimals there. So similarly, just to touch on this, I can also apply some formatting to the unit sale price as well. Okay, so we now have a value of the sale. Now, the next thing we're going to have a look at is a couple of calculations here that will draw on values from other tables. Now, to start with, our sales reps, while they probably enjoy their job, really would prefer to get paid some commission. So I'm going to go equals, I'm going to click on the sale value, I'm going to multiply that by, now we have a function that we can use related, which allows me to draw on values in related tables. So it's important that you would have set your relationships up before you get to this point. Now we need a table, the column name that we're actually referring to. So I'm going over to product info. Notice it's actually built this, so I've clicked the tab for product info and it's actually building this for me. Now with some square brackets, I've put my square bracket in there and it's bringing up a little drop down list I now get to choose. Again, those of you with exposure to Visual Studio or other products will have seen this auto suggesting happen elsewhere. So we're saying we're using commission, so I've selected commission, and I now just need to close my brackets there, very much like you would with your if and other functions in Excel. You've got to make sure your brackets are all nice and tidy. And now I can just click the tick or press enter to confirm it, and it's gone through using the commission percentages in the other table to work out our actual sales value. I'll do to work out our actual commission value. I'll leave the cents for commission because this company, they're not big payers for commission, so we want to count up all the cents as well as everything else. So we're now seeing our commission there. So again, just another little use of our formatting. Just also to make our product info a little bit easier to read, we do have the ability to use percentage formatting there as well. So we can see different percentage rates for different products, and that being reflected in earning more or less commission on our different sales. Okay, now the last little calculation I'm going to actually do here is I want to actually have the name of the month of the sale and the year. Now this will partly use some functions and some values in related tables. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to go equals related, open brackets, and I'm now going to head off to months, and I want the related month name. Now remember, we've got a relationship on the numerical value of the month, and that's now telling me I've got December, and if I scroll down I've got some for January. Now these are in 2 different years. In fact, that's worth just covering. I've got 2 different years, 2010 and 2009. So for effective grouping in my pivot table later, I also need the year. Now this one's nice and easy. You will have almost certainly have seen this in Excel. I'm going equals year, and then I'm going to go over, just staying in the same table, pick my transaction date, close the brackets and press enter. So we've now got all the data we need. We've got formulas, we've got additional calculations, we've got some month and year information so that we can do what is effectively some grouping in our Power Pivot. And so we're ready for the final step where we're going to build some pivot tables. Welcome back. Now we're going to create a pivot table. So up on the ribbon we have our pivot table tool. Let's just have a little bit of a look at what we've got here. Is a range of dashboard type reports that we can generate with pivot tables and charts and so on there. I'm just going to start with a basic good old-fashioned pivot table, and it takes me back to my workbook. I'm going to create a new worksheet to put my pivot table in, and now you'll notice over on the right we have the ability here to draw data from different tables. For example, if I open up product info, I can see my product name field, which is not available in the sales data. The sales data only has the ID. So I want to report by product, so I can take product in and drop it in as a column heading, or I can make it a row heading. Really just depending on how you want it organised. Those of you who've worked with conventional pivot tables are going to be recognising a lot of what we're doing here. So I'll go down into the sales data, and I've got sale value, which you might remember was our calculation that we did. So I'll drop that in, and we've now got a total of the value of our sales. That's units by the item price for all our different product categories. Okay, so far so good. Now I have my salesperson here in the sales data, and I can take that and drag it and drop it into columns. So now what I have is a nice little report. Now for those of you who like their formatting with their conventional pivot tables, I'm just clicking in the pivot table. Up on the ribbon I have the design tab. I can go for banded rows and choose a colour scheme to match, you know, whatever particular colours we're looking for. This is the modern colour set that come with Excel 2013. So there's my report, nicely presented. You'll notice you've got all your report layout tools, analytical tools and so on are here. Now let's make another pivot table working with dates, and we'll see how we can address that date grouping issue. So let's start with making a new pivot table. Now I'll just illustrate the underlying problem. If I take transaction date and make that a row, much like you would with the regular pivot table, and the sale value, and we'll make that a value. Now, what you would do normally is right-click, bring up your shortcut menu, choose grouping and group by dates. I have an old SharePoint, the Excel 2007 video that actually illustrates how to do that, but you'll notice the options actually grayed out in our shortcut menu here. It's just not there. So what do? Let's go to Plan B. So what I'm going to take here is my, let's do a summary by product perhaps. So if I go to product info, grab my product name, and I want to get this as a monthly report, I can, from my related table, bring across the month name, or because I've done a calculation, I can actually bring that across here as well. And I'll also group this by year so that we get grouping by year and by month and appropriate totals. Now, one of the little glitches with this is it does do this by alphabetical order. So what we're going to do is just move that around so we can actually drag and move the columns around to get them in the right order. But effectively what we do have now is grouping by month and by year. So that is a solution to that problem. We can also do this through some formatting, and I'm going to have a short lesson 2 video that actually shows you, rather than through relationships, how to do that through formatting. But that's actually working for us. There we go. So from here we move on to explore all the different power tools over a series of sessions. We'll have a look next at dates, calculations and KPIs with Power Pivot. We will also look at Power Pivot with different sorts of data. This first session has just been Excel. We'll also have a look at Power View, Power Map, Power Query, and ultimately, although possibly not for a few weeks, Power BI as well, which is available as a separate product or with certain levels of SharePoint Online. So this is what I was going to call Microsoft's Power Friends, which is kind of a superhero thing, but I think that's already been taken, so we'll call these the Power Tools. So back soon with more.